Saudi Arabia, Turkiye, and Pakistan have signed a defense agreement in Makkah. The headline sounds like the birth of an Islamic NATO. An armed attack on one country will be regarded as an attack on all three. But what does the agreement actually require each country to do? Does it create a permanent military command? Does it guarantee Pakistani nuclear protection for Saudi Arabia? And has Mohammed bin Salman really given Donald Trump a geopolitical headache? The answer is more complicated and more interesting than a simple victory or defeat. Today, we are separating the confirmed facts from the speculation. In this analysis, we will examine what the Makkah Agreement confirms, what Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan bring to the partnership, how the Pact affects Donald Trump and the Abraham Accords, and the unanswered questions that will determine whether this becomes a real security alliance. Stay with me, because the most important part of this agreement may be what the public document does not say. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan signed the Makkah Joint Defence Agreement on August 7, 2026. The central pledge is straightforward. An armed attack against any one of the three countries will be regarded as an attack against all three. The agreement is intended to strengthen collective deterrence and expand defense cooperation. That is the confirmed core. It is significant because these are three influential Muslim-majority states with different geographic positions, military capabilities, and diplomatic relationships. A public commitment of this kind tells potential adversaries that an attack could create political consequences beyond the country that is directly targeted. But we must be careful with the word binding. The public reporting available so far does not give us a detailed operational treaty text. We have not seen a publicly explained joint command, fixed troop contributions, an automatic deployment timetable, or a precise formula for deciding how each member must respond. That does not make the agreement meaningless. Many security partnerships begin with a political commitment and develop practical institutions later. But it does mean we should not describe the pact as NATO before we know how it will work in a crisis. NATO is not only a sentence about collective defense, it is also a system of planning, command, exercises, logistics, and established procedures. The careful description is this: the Makkah Agreement is a collective defense framework and a strategic signal. Its ultimate military strength remains to be tested. For Saudi Arabia, the immediate benefit is strategic diversification. Riyadh has maintained an important security relationship with the United States, while also building its own military capabilities and expanding relationships with other major powers. The new pact gives Saudi Arabia additional political and defense channels. Turkey offers a major regional military and defense industrial partner. Pakistan offers a historic security relationship, considerable military experience, and the strategic weight of being a nuclear-armed state. Saudi Arabia brings resources, geography, religious significance, and the ability to finance major defense and infrastructure projects. In simple terms, the three countries offer one another different forms of value. But diversification is not the same as replacement. This pact does not prove that Saudi Arabia has abandoned Washington. It does not automatically replace American intelligence, air defense, logistics, technology, or diplomatic reach. The realistic interpretation is that Riyadh wants more than one security option. That matters in negotiations. A country with several relationships may have more room to resist pressure from any single partner. Saudi Arabia can continue talking to Washington while demonstrating that it is also capable of building alternative partnerships. Turkey brings a large military, a significant defense industry, experience with drones, and regional diplomatic influence. But we should not assume that every Turkish capability is automatically available to the other members. The real test will be contracts, training, exercises, and deployment arrangements. Pakistan brings a large and experienced military, a deep relationship with Saudi Arabia, and strategic significance as the only nuclear-armed state in the Muslim world. That strategic status may affect how potential adversaries calculate risk. But let us make one crucial distinction. Pakistan's nuclear capability does not automatically mean that Saudi Arabia has received nuclear protection. There is no basis for saying that nuclear weapons have been transferred to Saudi Arabia, or that Pakistan has publicly promised to use nuclear weapons on its behalf. The safer interpretation is that Pakistan contributes strategic weight, military cooperation, and deterrence value. Those are important, but they are not the same thing as a formal nuclear umbrella. Responsible analysis must keep that distinction clear. The timing reflects a region in which governments are reassessing their security assumptions. Saudi Arabia faces risks from missiles, drones, regional conflict, and uncertainty about how external powers might respond during a crisis. Turkey has its own interest in strategic autonomy and regional influence. Pakistan has historic and economic ties with Saudi Arabia and an interest in Gulf security. Each country, therefore, has a reason to participate, even though their foreign policy priorities are not identical. The agreement is also a message. To Washington, it says that Gulf partners may seek additional security relationships rather than wait for one outside power to define the region's choices. To other regional actors, it says that Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan are prepared to coordinate more closely. However, a message is not the same as a tested alliance. Its credibility will depend on what happens next. Joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, air defense cooperation, defense production, and clear procedures for a crisis. The signing ceremony is the beginning of the story, not proof that the alliance is already operational. This brings us to Donald Trump. On July 23, 2026, reporting said that Trump linked a possible United States-Saudi civilian nuclear arrangement to Saudi participation in the Abraham Accords. That position gives Washington a powerful bargaining tool, American technology and security cooperation in exchange for a major diplomatic decision by Riyadh. The Makkah Agreement complicates that negotiation because it gives Saudi Arabia another option to display. Riyadh can say, "We value the United States, but we are not without alternatives. We can deepen ties with Turkiye and Pakistan while continuing to negotiate with Washington." That is leverage, but it is not necessarily a winning hand. A defense pact still has to deliver practical capabilities. The United States has global military reach, advanced intelligence systems, established bases, and long-standing regional relationships. Turkiye and Pakistan bring real strengths, but they do not simply reproduce the entire American security architecture. So did Saudi Arabia outsmart Trump? That headline is attractive, but too definite. A more accurate conclusion is that Saudi Arabia has widened its negotiating options. It may now be able to ask Washington for better terms without appearing completely dependent on one security provider. Does the Makkah Pact destroy the Abraham Accords? There is no evidence that it does. The agreement does not announce that Saudi Arabia has rejected normalization with Israel, and it does not prevent Riyadh from continuing talks with Washington. What it does is create a second track. On one track, Saudi Arabia can negotiate with the United States over security, nuclear technology, economic cooperation, and possible relations with Israel. On another track, it can strengthen relationships with Muslim-majority powers that do not share Washington's approach to Israel. Turkiye has criticized Israeli military actions, and Pakistan does not maintain diplomatic relations with Israel. That makes the new partnership politically significant. But we should not automatically turn political differences into a declared military bloc against Israel. The public agreement is described as defensive, and its full implementation details remain limited. The better conclusion is that Saudi Arabia is trying to avoid being locked into one regional security architecture. It wants flexibility, it wants leverage, and it wants to keep more than one door open. Iran will also watch the pact carefully. A closer relationship between Saudi Arabia, Turkiye, and Pakistan could affect calculations across the Gulf and the wider Middle East, but it would be premature to call the agreement an immediate anti-Iran alliance. Turkey has its own complicated relationship with Iran, and each member will calculate its interests differently. The same caution applies to Israel. The new partnership may complicate Israeli and American plans for a regional security architecture, especially if it gives Saudi Arabia more independence. But the pact does not automatically create a military confrontation. The regional system is becoming more flexible and more crowded. Countries are building overlapping partnerships rather than choosing one permanent camp. That makes diplomacy more complicated, but it may also give governments more ways to manage risk. 3 questions will determine whether the Makkah Agreement becomes genuinely powerful. First, what exactly happens after an attack? Does every member provide troops, weapons, intelligence, air defense, and logistics, or only political support? Second, is there a permanent command and planning structure, or will every crisis require a fresh political decision? Third, will the members conduct exercises, share intelligence, and build joint defense projects? These practical steps will tell us more than dramatic phrases such as Islamic NATO. Here is the bottom line. The Makkah Agreement is important because it creates a public security commitment among Saudi Arabia, Turkiye, and Pakistan. It gives Riyadh additional diplomatic options and sends a message to Washington that Saudi Arabia wants strategic flexibility. But it is not yet possible to say that Saudi Arabia has escaped dependence on the United States, that the Abraham Accords are finished, or that Pakistan has offered a nuclear guarantee. The most defensible verdict is this: the Makkah Pact is an important signal and an unfinished alliance. Now tell me what you think. Is this a genuine security framework or mainly a negotiating signal to Washington? Comment framework if you think it could become operational, or comment signal if you think the public details are still too limited. If you want the evidence behind this conclusion, watch the next video in this series, What the Makkah Pact Does Not Say. Subscribe or follow Katakyie Brief for source-based geopolitical analysis, and share this video with someone who wants the facts separated from the hype.